In November 1922, British archaeologist Howard Carter stood in the scorching heat of Egypt's Valley of the Kings, about to make the find of a lifetime. When he chipped a hole in the doorway of tomb KV62 and peered inside, he saw a staggering sight: over 5,000 perfectly preserved artifacts piled high in the darkness. This was the funerary hoard of Tutankhamun. Among the chariots and jewelry sat the ultimate prize, a solid gold funerary mask inlaid with lapis lazuli. The discovery ignited a media frenzy that swept the globe. Over the following decades, King Tut became an international obsession, appearing on everything from household products to a hit novelty song by comedian Steve Martin. Yet for all this modern fame, his name was nowhere to be found in ancient records. Prior to 1922, he had been entirely omitted from the official lists of kings compiled by his own people. The most recognized pharaoh of our time was a ghost in his own history. To understand why, we have to look past the golden mask and examine the physical evidence left with the boy himself. In roughly 1332 BC, the young pharaoh took the throne of an empire in turmoil. The country had been upended by his father, Akhenaten. He had outlawed the traditional gods of Egypt, mandating the exclusive worship of a single sun disk known as the Aten. The new heir, originally named Tutankhamun, was only 9 years old. He was far too young to govern, leaving him under the control of two powerful advisors, the courtier Ai and General Horemheb. These advisors used the child to execute a political reversal. They forced him to abandon his father's religion, restore the old gods, and change his name to Tutankhamun, meaning the living image of Amun. From his very first day as pharaoh, Tutankhamun functioned as a political instrument, used by the old regime to restore their own authority. The artifacts found inside his tomb depict the king as an invincible warrior, riding into battle on this golden chariot. Modern medical science tells a different story. Decades of CT scans and DNA tests have peered beneath the wrappings, stripping away the state-sponsored propaganda. Those tests revealed a boy king who bore the genetic consequences of royal inbreeding. He lived with a cleft palate and a condition called chronic bone necrosis, where his bone tissue was progressively dying. He also had a pronounced clubfoot. Standing upright in a speeding chariot would have been physically impossible without significant help. Tucked among the treasures were over 130 walking canes. These weren't mere symbols of office. Wear patterns on the tips show they were used as regular mobility aids throughout his life. The boy behind the gold was fragile and in constant pain. There was a massive gap between the divine figure shown to the public and the reality of his physical life. At age 19, his reign came to an abrupt end. While early theories suspected murder, modern analysis indicates he likely died from an infected leg fracture, exacerbated by multiple strains of malaria. His death was so sudden that he was buried in this cramped, non-royal tomb. KV62 is essentially a footnote compared to the sprawling layouts designed for his predecessors. Following his death, his advisor Ai took the throne, followed shortly after by the military commander Horemheb. To legitimize his own rule, Horemheb launched a ruthless campaign to scrub the entire Amarna bloodline from existence. Workers chiseled Tutankhamun's name off stone monuments and recarved his statues to look like Horemheb. His name was systematically struck from every official record. His successors had condemned him to total historical oblivion, a sentence that, in Egyptian belief, meant his soul would cease to exist for eternity. Fast forward through the centuries, and that very campaign of erasure produced a massive, unintended consequence. Because Tutankhamun was struck from the official records, ancient grave robbers never knew his tomb existed. They had no reason to look for a king who had been forgotten. Later pharaohs, unaware he was buried there, built their own monuments directly above his. The construction waste cascaded down the hillside, creating a thick, protective layer of debris that hid the entrance to KV62 for thousands of years. Contrast that with the great pharaohs who tried to erase him. Their famous tombs were obvious targets, and every single one was raided and emptied in antiquity. By doing everything in their power to silence his legacy, Tutankhamun's enemies accidentally created a perfect time capsule. They ensured that a boy forgotten by his own people would become the most recognized face of their entire civilization.